Welcome to Still. Well, I'm really excited today to have Senator Mike Gravel with me on Still Left Out in America, the podcast to go with the books Still Left Out in America, because there are a whole pile of people still left out in America, and we're going to discuss some of those folks. Welcome to the show, Senator. How are you?
Thank you for having me on. And at 90 years old, I'm feeling pretty good.
That's great. That's wonderful. I'm just going to do a quick bio. You can fix me up if I go wrong in any direction. Most people know you as a United States Senator who had the courage to save Daniel Ellsberg's life by reading the Pentagon Papers into the congressional record, which was beyond heroic. And if no one has seen the video of you doing that, it's on YouTube. You can just go for a search. It's really heartwarming to see someone have the courage to stand up to corruption in government, and that's just a must-see video. You're also an author. You've written a bunch of books, probably one of the most famous, Citizen Power, but one I want to talk to a little bit tonight, The Kingmakers, where you talk about how the media can make a king, which I think we're living in right now.
Well, Patricia, I would really love to have you discuss the latest book, which is The Failure of Representative Government and the Solution.
Okay, we will absolutely get to that.
Okay, great. Okay.
All right. And then just a little more background. You were in the United States military. You were in the Army and counterintelligence. You're a Columbia University grad. So
correct.
No slouch there, Senator.
What? I drove a cab while I was going to Columbia and then went up to Alaska after that and got there broke. And 12 years later, I'm sitting in a Senate. The message there is work hard and be lucky.
So were you Speaker of the House for Alaska?
Yes, for one term. I went from freshman to Speaker. That'll give you an idea of how I jumped over a lot of political bodies. But after that, I ran for the House and lost, the U.S. House, and then I ran for the Senate and won.
Oh, fantastic. I do want to speak to you about your book, but I wanted to talk to you real quickly about something, because this podcast deals pretty closely with poverty and the problems of homelessness and housing. And this week, Secretary Donovan, who was the Secretary of HUD during the Obama administration, was on NPR talking about the president's new rule where he's going to save the suburbs by keeping affordable and low-income housing out of the suburbs, which is a dog whistle for people of color, although there are plenty of working class people that are white still. I had the opportunity to meet Secretary Donovan back when he was Secretary of HUD. And while they did a lot more than had been done recently for people to have housing, they did nothing compared to what was done during the Johnson administration and the Carter administration prior to Ronald Reagan coming in and pretty much inventing the welfare queen and then declaring war on her. Do you have any recollections or reminiscences of when you were fighting the good fight and they were beginning to, you were there when Ronald Reagan came in, when they were beginning to dismantle supports for people of marginal means?
No, I just missed that. I left office in 1980, 81, and Reagan came in shortly after that. So no, I didn't have any contact in that. And of course, it's a subject that it was automatic for me to be able to support that and vote for these programs. My major focus was on trying to disassemble the military-industrial complex, which robbed us of the monies we would need for proper housing, healthcare, you name it, infrastructure, and they're still robbing us to this day. It's abysmal. It's criminal, in fact.
There's 8 billion in the Republican stimulus plan for the military, for military equipment, which I don't think you can fight a virus with a bomber.
Not at all. In fact, when you say 8 billion, they authorized what is 740 or 50 billion for the year, and then this 8 billion I'm not aware of, but I am aware of they're asking for another 20 billion to be able to continue confrontation in the South China Sea. It doesn't get any sicker than what we're experiencing with the military, the Pentagon acting as pigs, just rooting around and denying people what would be their proper resources. And there was a recent vote in the authorization in the Senate, and the authorization was 76 to 23. When I went through name by name, I was able to pick out 23 Democrats who voted for this. Or actually, no, I'm sorry. This was the 10% reduction that was introduced by Bernie Sanders in the House. It failed there, and it failed also in the Senate, and it was by 23 votes. And had the Democrats kept the line, it would have failed because it would have been a tie. But now, and let me tell you, some of the Democrats, it just boggles you. So let's say the 2 senators from Rhode Island did not support it. The 2 senators from California, Feinstein and Harris, did not vote to support the 10% cut. Now, if they're afraid to cut this budget by 10% when it's obscene, when the Secretary of Defense under Kennedy, formerly with the head of Ford, I forget his name. He was asked. Now, this is Secretary of Defense during the whole Vietnam period, and when he was asked, well, what amount could you cut from the defense budget and not jeopardize the nation's security? He said 50%. And I agree with that. When how many tanks do you need? We're still manufacturing tanks. We got over 6,000 of them. How are we going to use all these tanks and where? And then you could go on from there on the various programs.
Police departments in Portland, Oregon, and Chicago, and we're going to mobilize the military at home, right? Yeah, Robert McNamara. That's what I was thinking. McNamara was the secretary.
He's the Secretary of Defense, one of the sharpest ones in American history in that capacity. And he said that we could cut the defense budget by 50% without impairing our safety. And you got a classic example of that. We got 12 Trident submarines. One submarine can hold the world hostage, and we got 12 of them. How many do we need? We've got 12 aircraft carriers? I mean, give me a break. We just had 2 of them sail in the South China Sea to guarantee the navigational passage. Well, they don't need to guarantee a navigational passage. China, Japan, Taiwan, and South Korea, they all use this area to transmit their wares to the rest of the globe. And so why do we think we got to be there with aircraft carriers when they're handsomely transiting the South China Seas with their merchant vessels? It's a sick situation.
So I'm really curious. So I also read a story today that said most Americans think that crime is up, but actually crime is down. And this story you're telling about how we're told, oh, well, we're mad at China, so we need to send some aircraft carriers over there and flex some muscles because China's, they do very naughty things like the the refugees, the Muslim refugees, they've put into concentration camps over there.
Whoa, wait a second. What about all the racists in this country?
Right, absolutely. Well, and I guess think that was China's response was, didn't you just have famously have a man's neck kneeled on until he died? You know, you have plenty of racism in your own country to clean up. But we're told all these things as people. We can't afford housing. We can't afford to have enhanced unemployment benefits. We can't, 10% of that military budget that Bernie was talking about would have paid the bills for a lot of this stuff. We can't afford that. Oh, and by the way, crime is up and we have to be afraid of China. Neither one of those stories are true. So.
Well, here, one thing I want to get across on China, which you may have heard, maybe not. If you're measuring what country has brought more freedom to human beings than any other country. Now, as an American, you jump up and say, yes, that's not so. That's the damn lie. Because when you look at the history of the laboring class between 1865 and 1945, you see that the government overwhelmingly was abusive to the working person, and all they wanted was an 8-hour-a-day week with safety at the work site. Now, compare that to the last 30 years, where China has moved 600 million human beings from poverty to middle class. Now, when you're middle class, it means you can afford to send your kids to college. It means you can have a decent life. And they've done more than any other country in human civilization. 600 million. Now, you can say, well, they can't vote for the president. Well, that's fine. We vote for the president. It doesn't seem to do much good. But as far as their the balance of freedom of them in a civil society is unquestioned. And that's what China has done, the first of its kind in human civilization. And I think that if Americans would reflect on that, it might instill a little bit of humility into our arrogance.
Yeah, well, I would, from your lips to their ears. So you have spent a great deal of your life saying to people, Pat LaMarche, you want some housing? You want access to healthcare for all the people of the country? You want to be able to make sure that people have food on the table? Why don't you get a referendum going? Stop it depending on these elected officials that have fancy dinners. When I was a bartender after I ran for vice president at a place, and sometimes people would catch on to who I was, but usually not. And a law was passed that said in the state legislature, you couldn't sit down to dinner with a lobbyist. So the lobbyists would hire the restaurant to serve dinner at standing tables. So they'd go to dinner literally, and everyone would stand at the table, and the lobbyists would take the senators and state senators and representatives out to dinner. And so anyway, all those are the people that you can't necessarily depend on to pass the laws. When Bernie Sanders says it's time to cut the military budget by 10%, and then he's got to go to a bunch of people who've been, you know, having these fancy dinners with people who may not have our agenda. So you've always championed, and all the time I've known you, the idea that we as people can make our own laws. You want to tell us about that?
Yeah, well, it's covered in Citizen Power, which was published back in 2008, and it's now covered in great detail with the failure of representative government and the solution being bringing people into the operation of government as lawmakers. Now, laws is the heart of civilization. Laws is how we govern ourselves. And so it's making of the laws is critical. Right now, the Congress has a monopoly on lawmaking. And since the Congress is controlled by the elites of society, then it means that the elites of society control the essence of our system of governance. Now that has to change. And the only way it's going to change is if you can empower the people to break the monopoly of the Congress and permit people to make laws in an independent, deliberative fashion. And the book that I have, The Failure, which outlines in great detail what the failure is in representative government. And the failure is threefold: is the threat of nuclear annihilation, which of course the United States right now is hell-bent on refurbishing our nuclear weapons to the tune of $2 trillion. And this all started in Obama's administration and is carried through. So when the Democrats vote in the House to approve the defense budget, it includes monies to expand our nuclear capability. This is abysmal. And so when you have both parties joining in this, you've got to question one, representative government. And I do question it. And I do point out that representative government is a failure. It's a failure to provide what's needed by the people. And so what we have to do, there's only two venues for change. One is the government, wherein lies the problem, and the other is the people. And the people don't have the tools to be able to enact legislation. And so what I've done with this book is create a manual to create and operate a legislature of the people. And the book is only 120 pages, so you can read it in one sitting. And those who read it, who understand it, are committed to it. Now, what my hope is that in the next 6 months, we're preparing a campaign where we will try to get Americans to buy the book, read it, and discuss it. Now, unless the American people can understand that they are part of the solution and can be the solution, if they don't understand that, there's no hope. We've been all mesmerized by the military-industrial complex, which is not only running the Congress, they're running our culture. Just look at the militarization takes place in our culture with sports. And you could go on from there. Every facet of our democracy, no, we don't have a democracy. Every facet of our governing process is controlled by the military, whether it's the churches, whether it's the educational system, or whether it's the enactment of laws by a structure of government that they control. The only way we can make that change is for the people to become aware that they are the solution. So it means that we've got to sell these books to people and hopefully they'll discuss it and understand it. So when I say that the American people can make laws as good, or actually not as good, much better than the Congress, they need to understand that. And in order to do that, you have to overcome the mainstream media just making off we're not there.
This happens all over the United States, where there are, like for instance, Maine. Maine now has instant runoff voting, and they enacted that in Maine, and then the representatives thought, well, this is bad. We like this spoiler system. That's so that the marginal can still win. The guy with the plurality gets the totality of the power. And they tried to eliminate it, and the people took out a referenda and they protected it. So the people took the vote in their own hands and said to the state government, you can't force this down our throat. Same thing happened. Maine had same day voter registration, and the legislature of Maine put a waiting period on registration so that if you didn't register before the election, you couldn't vote, losing your franchise. And the people of Maine passed a referendum and said, no, we want a same day, and they took it back. So this happens, and it happens in states about what, 18 or so all across the country. So what
23, and it's very poor law. You just lucked out in Maine to be able to do what you've been doing. But I think in Maine, the initiative cannot be used to change the Constitution. And in some states it can. And so if the people can make laws, they should be able to change their constitutions.
That's a concept. And without the Constitution.
And when you use the word, and when you use the framework referenda, you want to keep in mind that referendums are government tools. In other words, it's like putting a school board funding on the ballot. You know, all you can do is vote yes or no. But the decision on doing that and the particulars of it is done by government. So no, we have to have people making laws independent, totally independent of government. And we do that by creating a legislature of the people with a Legislative Procedures Act that permits a citizen's trust to be able to take care of the procedures on behalf of the people. And every the element of this is in the book, The Failure of Representative Government.
Okay, so everybody needs to run out and grab that. We'll have you back on, and you can talk to people once they've read it and they've digested it. But
oh God, yes. And if they could make clubs for discussion, that's what it takes. We cannot proceed to enact the law to create this amendment. We cannot proceed unless people understand it.
Mhm.
Once they understand it, we'll get it enacted into law post haste.
Okay,
But,
so
but the people first have to understand that they are the solution. This kissing up and hoping that you can have another election, things are going to get better. Here, they're going to have an election right now, and it's going to get better because we're going to defeat Trump. But the Democrats are going to control the executive, the Senate, the House, and trust me, you'll be disappointed in what they can accomplish.
so how do people get the book?
You can get the best way to get the book, because it creates more revenue for us, is to go to my website, mikegravel.com. And you have two books. You got the Citizen Power and you got the Failure. And you can just press the button for the Failure. And you can also get the what is it? The ebook. And that's $3. And the soft cover, I don't believe in hard covers because that just makes more money for the publishers. But you can get a soft cover for, I believe it's $14.50. Now, unfortunately, because of the pandemic, the transportation cost is really been has risen. But right now, the only thing that I would recommend, go ahead and get the ebook, and it for $3. You know, you'll have more than you can say grace over, and it's only 120 pages, and so therefore, and I have one chapter which is my wish list, but it's my wish list. What people have to understand is with this legislature of the people, I am trying to equip you to be able to make laws. And I will obviously equip myself, but we're one in 100 million people, one or two. And so what you have to understand is that the people will be able to decide what they want. I know what I want, but that's not the people. But what I'm doing is I'm putting in place the tools where the people will be able to make laws in a direct way, direct democracy, and will counter the monopoly that's held by the Congress. Now, we don't do away with the Congress. We don't change representative government. We just add direct democracy along with representative government. Now, what's the beautiful part of this is when the people ratify our amendment to the Constitution, it automatically puts them in the senior partner. So as the senior partners, if representative government and the representatives don't shape up, then of course we have the capacity to do away with them. And they'll understand that. So this is a win-win. You'll have the day-by-day operation of government more efficiently and effectively. And then the policies will be set by the people directly. And so, and the legislature, the Congress, the executive, will effect the laws that the people set up in policy. That's a win-win from my point of view. Now, what will that do? That will set up the stage where the people will be able to now do away with the military-industrial complex. Because if you ask 70, 80% of the American people, they don't want this military-industrial complex. But they can't get rid of it because the people who vote for it are owned lock and stock barrel by the forces of the elites.
They could get rid of the Electoral College.
Well, oh, that's a given. That'd be first on the list. The other is to change the decision of Supreme Court by the United Citizens United. But the one that I love the best is the cap we're going to put on that a House member will serve 4 years and will only be able to have 3 terms. So after 12 years, you're out. And of course, what's beautiful is that the Supreme Court and all federal courts would be 12 years and you're out. Now, think of what the problem we've just, what's had to it. Mitch McConnell has run through 200 federal judges. That means that we're going to have 50 years of conservative judicial decision making. And there's nothing you can do about it under the present circumstances. But if you equip the people to make laws, they'll be able to put a cap of 12 years on every one of those judges, including time served. So that would mean that the Supreme Court, all members have been there for 12 years, not all, but most of them. And then you'll be able to turn around and to equip them to end their term. Here, Clarence Thomas has been there almost 30 years and he's going to be there another 20 years. The Democrats put Clarence Thomas in office. It wasn't done by the Republicans. And I could go on from there. But here, the only way we have of correcting the imbalance in our judicial system is to limit federal judges to 12 years of service and do the same thing for the president, only you limit him to 6 years, him or her to 6 years.
As you said, this would be a referendum. So if anyone disagrees with
No,
this,
not referendum. It would be people making laws.
right? It would be the citizens' legislature. And
Correct.
so if
Correct.
people disagree with it, one of the things you've said, then they can get out and work against that, or they can work for something different. But it would be the people making the law. They say, we don't like the fact that our kids have crappy schools. They can make a law to improve the schools. They don't like the fact that there are too many people who are hungry. They can change the laws to do that. And that's what the roadmap is for inside your book, The Failure of Representative Democracy. And folks can get that at your website, microvell.com. And we're going to come back and revisit this in a few months when we've got some people who've read the book.
Please do, Pat, because I can't think of anything more important than getting this initiative enacted. Now, the revenues that we'll be getting from the book, we'll use that to plow back to expand the knowledge of the book. So it's not a question of enriching myself. It's a question of funding the educational process to inform the American people that they can make the changes that they want. They don't have to wait on the Congress because it will never get done.
Now, you are in a unique position to speak to the fact that people are hungry for change, because this year you launched a campaign for president. And literally—
Well, wait a second, Pat. The kids did. I had 2 18-year-old kids that wanted me to run for president. When they asked me, I said, do you realize how old I am? And they said, it doesn't make any difference. It's the issues that you raise that we want to continue to feature them as to the American people. And so I gave them permission to do, pardon me?
It took off like crazy.
Well, that's because these kids, all I did was stay home in the old-fashioned way, because when people ran for president in the old days, they didn't leave their homes. They made speeches off their front porch. And so what I did is I responded to requests for interviews, but that was it. That was the campaign. And here again, I got as much visibility as I got with the Pentagon Papers.
Right. And so this is what I think really speaks to the fact that people are hungry for a different voice, a new way. Maybe maybe, so we've got two 18-year-olds who should have 80 or 90 more years to make this sort of a difference go on in the future, that have gotten so involved that they got you to participate and raise a huge amount of awareness.
Well, they were able to really vibrate within their own constituencies of young people. But by the same token, I did receive a lot of interviews. There's a new book coming out, is the American, what do you call them, Gadfly. And that's about the kids and myself in the campaign.
Fun.
And so I know that they're trying to peddle it with YouTube and others. But the key thing is to educate the people to understand their constitutional power, understand their sovereign power. And they don't understand that at this point in time, because if they did, they would react, but they don't. What they do is they go back to the same old, and you're going to get the same old with, and I'm going to vote for Biden for president. You know, I think Trump is an absolutely fool. But I realistically realize that Trump's attitude towards China and Russia is going to be partially improved, but very partially. The rhetoric that we're getting from the mainstream media is all warmongering. And one of the interesting things that they do when they say there's a threat, well, there's a threat from who? Let's say Russia is a threat to us, or China is a threat to us. But what does that threat mean? What are they going to do? Are they going to attack us? Why would they attack us? They're sending vessels over there after vessels full of goods to sell in the United States. Russia is selling its gas in Europe to warm their houses. Now, why would they want to attack? So when you hear people talk about the threat, you got to say, well, okay, well, why would they attack us? What's the problem that they would physically do violence to us, would attack us with nukes? You know, who's got the most nukes? We do. In Russia. China is not a threat. If you want to get an overview of what's going on, you look at who's spending what amount of money on defense or on war making. And we far and away spend more. China is about 15% of our budget, and Russia is just a little less than 10%. So they're not a threat. And so for the American media to keep putting forth the concept, oh, the Russians are coming. They're not coming. We don't need to have troops in Europe. We don't need NATO. NATO should have been put out of business when the Warsaw Pact collapsed. But no, we maintain NATO in order to be able to fund the military-industrial complex. That's what this is all about. It's profit and money, and what it could do is it could do exactly what it did in 1914. People were armed to the hilt, and though nobody wanted to go to war, we had this unbelievable, terrible war. Well, we had the same situation today. Nobody wants to go to war, as they say, but listen to the military people in the speeches these admirals and generals make. And I got to tell you, it's obscene. That's the only word I can think of. It's obscene.
Yeah, especially in a country with people who lack health care and a roof over their head. We're going to air this. We're taping it right now, but we're going to air this on August 8th, because I think that's an appropriate day, considering it's the anniversary of the bombing of Nagasaki. And so on a day when we should be solemnly acknowledging the absolute slaughter that we can bring forth on this planet, maybe we can think differently about a new kind of government where we would care more about people and a little less about killing them.
Let's hope. There's a slogan that I put on the back of my book, and that is the world is my country, to do good is my religion. Thank you, Pat, for having me on.
Thank you so much, Senator Gravel. And we'll check back in with you in about 2 months when people have read your book, and we'll do a panel discussion. How's that sound?
Oh, that would be great. That would be great. I would just love that.
And if you'd like to be part of that panel, you can email me at patlamarsh@hotmail.com, and we'll grab the book and we'll put together a panel to have this discussion with the senator. And I want to thank Maxwell Parker Donnelly, our producer, for putting this show together. And thank you, Senator.
Okay, thank you.